Verstappen did not revolt because Russell won a few tenths. He revolted because the data looked too perfect. Too clean on traction. Too stable under braking. Too strong on tire life. Too repeatable across the lap. And in Formula 1, repeatable pace is never just pace. It is evidence. Because one fast lap can be luck. One perfect setup can be explained. But when a Mercedes suddenly looks calm where rivals are fighting, fast where it should be paying a price, and consistent where Red Bull expected it to fade, the question becomes dangerous. Did Russell simply drive a masterpiece, or did Mercedes find something hidden inside the rules? And this is where the FIA discovery becomes terrifying. Because if they found something illegal, the scandal explodes. But if they found alarming data and the car still passes, then Red Bull has a much bigger problem. Mercedes may have found a legal advantage. A secret so close to the limit that it looks suspicious, works on track, and forces Verstappen to fight not just Russell, but a performance trick Red Bull still does not fully understand. Subscribe to the channel. At first, Red Bull had two ways to explain Russell's pace. The comfortable way, and the dangerous way. The comfortable way was simple. Mercedes found the perfect setup. Russell drove cleanly. The tires switched on. The car landed in the right window. Austria suited them. That version gives everyone a reason to breathe. Because if the pace came from one perfect weekend, Red Bull could accept it, learn from it, and move on. But the dangerous version was different. The dangerous version said Russell's pace was not just fast. It was repeatable. And repeatable speed is the detail that changes everything. Because in Formula 1, a single fast lap can be ignored. A clean stint can be explained. A good launch out of one corner can happen. But when the same strength appears again and again, on braking, on traction, on tire life, on energy use, and across the full rhythm of the race, it stops looking like a moment. It starts looking like a system. That is what would have alarmed Verstappen. Not Russell being quick. Russell being quick in a way that looked too stable to dismiss. A Mercedes that brakes calmly is dangerous. A Mercedes that exits corners cleanly is dangerous. A Mercedes that protects its tires while still producing strong pace is even more dangerous. But a Mercedes that does all of those things together becomes a problem Red Bull has to understand immediately. Because a car with one strength can be attacked. If it is strong on the straights but weak in corners, you pressure it through the corners. If it is fast in qualifying but hard on tires, you wait for the race to punish it. If it is powerful in clean air but unstable under pressure, you force it into traffic. But a car that looks complete does not offer easy targets. And that is when Red Bull stops treating the result like a normal race outcome. That is when the data becomes the battlefield. Verstappen would not need a public explanation to know something felt wrong. Drivers at his level feel patterns before the fans see them. They feel when a rival is gaining where it should not. They feel when a car ahead has traction that does not match the tire age. They feel when braking stability looks too comfortable. They feel when the expected fade does not arrive. And in Austria, if Russell's Mercedes kept answering every question Red Bull expected it to fail, then Verstappen was never going to stay quiet. That is not just frustration. That is instinct. The instinct of a champion who knows unexplained pace cannot be allowed to become normal. Because once unexplained pace becomes normal, it is already too late. The points are gone. The rival has confidence. The development direction is stronger. The next race becomes harder before it even begins. So Red Bull had to ask the first question. Was Mercedes simply brilliant, or was there something inside the data that needed the FIA's attention? That question is explosive because it sits right on the line between innovation and illegality. And Formula 1 lives on that line. The fastest teams do not just read the rules. They search the spaces between the words. They look for what is allowed, what is not forbidden, and what can be pushed right to the edge without crossing it. That is where the sport becomes uncomfortable. Because sometimes a car looks suspicious because it is illegal. But sometimes a car looks suspicious because it is clever. And for Red Bull, the second possibility may be worse. If Mercedes had crossed the line, the FIA could act. A part could be removed. A result could be questioned. A technical directive could close the door. The scandal would be huge, but the problem would have a shape. But if Mercedes stayed legal, if the data looked alarming but the car still passed inspection, then Red Bull would face a colder truth. Russell's pace was real. And real pace cannot be protested away. It has to be beaten. That is why this first block of the story matters so much. Because the confrontation is not only about anger. It is about control. Red Bull wants control of the title fight. Verstappen wants control of the race. The engineers want control of the car's weaknesses and strengths. But Russell's pace created uncertainty. And uncertainty is poison at the front of Formula 1. It makes a team question its setup. It makes a driver push harder than planned. It makes engineers rewatch every trace. It makes strategy less confident. It makes every rival lap time feel like a clue. That is what suspicious pace does. It changes the mood before anyone proves anything. And that mood shift can be dangerous enough on its own. Because once Red Bull believes Mercedes may have found something, every decision becomes heavier. Do they pressure the FIA? Do they change development focus? Do they rush their own upgrades? Do they adjust the car for better tire life? Do they look at energy deployment? Do they study Russell's traction? Do they copy the concept? Do they ignore it and risk falling behind? There is no easy answer. Every choice has a cost. And while Red Bull is asking those questions, Mercedes is gaining something just as valuable as lap time. Confidence. That is the hidden damage. A fast Mercedes is one problem. A confident Mercedes is another. When a team believes its car has found a window, everything sharpens. The driver pushes with more trust. The engineers become more aggressive. The strategy team has more freedom. The factory believes the development path is working. And suddenly, one strong race becomes more than a result. It becomes momentum. Red Bull knows how powerful that can be, because Red Bull has used momentum against everyone else for years. They know what it feels like when rivals start studying your car. They know what it feels like when the paddock asks how your pace is possible. They know what it feels like when every small advantage becomes part of a bigger fear. So when the spotlight turns toward Mercedes, Red Bull understands the stakes instantly. This is not just about Russell. It is about whether Mercedes has found a performance chain Red Bull did not expect. A chain is much harder to fight than one trick. One trick can be copied. One trick can be banned. One trick can be isolated. But a chain connects everything. Better braking stability leads to cleaner corner entry. Cleaner corner entry protects the front tires. Better rear stability allows earlier throttle. Earlier throttle creates stronger corner exits. Stronger exits improve straight line speed. Less sliding protects the rear tires. Better tire life improves race pace. And race pace creates pressure. That is how a car becomes frightening. Not because one number looks strange. Because every part of the lap seems to support the next. That is what Verstappen would be watching. Not only the stopwatch. The behavior. Was Russell correcting the car less? Was the Mercedes kinder to its tires? Was it stronger at the end of the stint than expected? Was it deploying energy in a way that made it hard to attack? Was it braking with a level of stability Red Bull had not predicted? These are the clues that make a rival dangerous. And when enough clues appear together, the FIA becomes part of the conversation. Not because suspicion is proof. It is not. But because the front of Formula One operates on microscopic margins. A small illegal flexibility. A tiny energy irregularity. A clever aero interpretation. A gray area setup trick. Any of those could change a race. And when the title fight is tight, no team leaves those questions unanswered. That is why Verstappen's reaction would be so forceful. He understands that a championship can be damaged by waiting too long. If Mercedes has something illegal, Red Bull needs action now. If Mercedes has something legal, Red Bull needs understanding now. Either way, delay helps Mercedes. And Verstappen is not built to give rivals time. This is where the story becomes psychologically dangerous. Because the FIA does not only inspect the car. The FIA's role changes how everyone feels about the pace. If the car is found illegal, Mercedes becomes the center of a scandal. If the car is cleared, Mercedes becomes the center of a threat. Both outcomes hurt Red Bull in different ways. A scandal creates chaos, but also a possible solution. A cleared car creates no solution at all. It simply tells Red Bull, the speed is allowed. Now solve it. That is why the phrase illegal data is so powerful, but also so dangerous. Data can look strange. Data can raise questions. Data can trigger scrutiny. But the real impact depends on what the FIA can prove. A speed trace that alarms Red Bull is not automatically an illegal car. A tire pattern that looks too good is not automatically a violation. A Mercedes that looks suspiciously stable is not automatically cheating. But in Formula One, perception still matters. Because once people believe a car is hiding something, the pressure multiplies. Every onboard becomes evidence. Every straight line speed becomes suspicious. Every tire stint becomes a debate. Every Russell lap becomes part of the larger mystery. That is what Austria created. A mystery with consequences. Because Red Bull cannot afford to treat it lightly. The Austrian Grand Prix is the kind of circuit that exposes efficiency quickly. The lap is short. The corners demand traction. The braking zones demand confidence. The straights reward clean energy use. The tires punish sliding. If Mercedes looked strong there, Red Bull had to know why. Not later. Now. Because the same traits travel. A car with good traction can be dangerous on many circuits. A car with tire stability can be dangerous anywhere. A car with clean energy deployment can defend and attack more effectively all season. A car that gives Russell confidence can turn him from a race winner into a consistent title threat. That is what Red Bull had to stop before it became normal. And that is why Verstappen's revolt, whether public or behind closed doors, represents something bigger than anger. It represents a refusal to let Mercedes control the narrative. He is saying, this pace needs an explanation. He is saying, the FIA needs to look at the boundaries. He is saying, Red Bull cannot just accept a rival suddenly becoming this strong without understanding the reason. That is the mindset that wins championships. It can sound aggressive. It can look confrontational. But at the front of Formula One, politeness does not protect points. Certainty does. And Verstappen wanted certainty. Because the worst place for a champion is not behind a rival. The worst place is behind a rival he does not understand. That is the core of Block 1. Russell's pace was not frightening because it was fast. It was frightening because it created questions. Questions about legality. Questions about Mercedes' development. Questions about the FIA's interpretation. Questions about whether Red Bull had missed something. Questions about whether Austria was a one-off or the beginning of a trend. And the final question is the one that should worry Red Bull most. If the FIA really did find illegal data, then the Mercedes threat could be stopped. But if the FIA only found alarming data, and the car still stands, then Verstappen's real battle has just begun. Because then the problem is not Russell's car breaking the rules. The problem is Russell's car changing the fight. The second layer begins with the FIA, because the FIA is where suspicion either becomes a scandal or turns into something even harder for Red Bull to accept. A scandal has a shape. A part is illegal. A system breaks the rules. A result becomes questionable. The governing body steps in, and everyone knows what the fight is about. But alarming data is different. Alarming data can sit in the uncomfortable space between legal and suspicious. It can show something that makes rivals uncomfortable, without immediately proving that a rule has been broken. And that is where Formula One becomes dangerous. Because the fastest cars are often not built by teams that ignore the rules. They are built by teams that understand the rules more aggressively than everyone else. That is why Verstappen's anger would not be only about Russell. It would be about the line. Where is the line? Who is checking it? How close can Mercedes get to it before the FIA steps in? And if Mercedes is right on that line, but still legal, what does Red Bull do next? That is the question that changes the story. Because if the FIA checks Russell's car and finds a clear violation, then Red Bull has a target. Mercedes has a problem. Russell's pace has an explanation. The paddock erupts, the headlines explode, and the advantage can be challenged directly. But if the FIA looks at the data and says, the car is legal, then Verstappen faces the outcome he may hate even more. The pace stays. The threat stays. The mystery stays. And now Red Bull must fight a Mercedes advantage that cannot be removed by protest. It has to be understood. Then beaten. That is much harder. Because in Formula One, a legal advantage is not a scandal. It is a weapon. And the more unusual it looks, the more dangerous it becomes. If Russell's Mercedes was gaining through one obvious area, Red Bull could attack that area. If it was straight-line speed, adjust the drag level. If it was tire life, study the degradation. If it was traction, review suspension and rear stability. If it was energy deployment, analyze the hybrid usage. But the alarming part of a strong Mercedes performance is when the gain does not live in only one place. When the car looks better under braking, cleaner on corner exit, kinder to the tires, and still fast on the straights, the advantage starts to look connected. And connected performance is the hardest kind to fight. One gain feeds the next. A calmer rear end lets Russell apply throttle earlier. Earlier throttle gives him a better exit. A better exit makes the straight stronger. Less sliding keeps the tires cooler. Cooler tires make the stint last longer. A longer-lasting stint gives Mercedes strategy freedom. And suddenly, what looked like suspicious pace becomes a complete race package. That is the version Red Bull cannot ignore. Because Red Bull knows exactly how powerful a complete package can be. They have built seasons around it. They have forced rivals to chase it. They have watched other teams copy shapes without copying the understanding. So if Mercedes starts showing the same kind of connected strength, Verstappen would feel the danger immediately.